having a safe place where you feel like, okay, I can have these kinds of conversations and not get judged, or I can show up as who I am, and it's accepted, right? And so the sense of belonging, it's it's a human need.
Hey y'all, I'm excited to share this episode with you today. Christy, Lowry, and I got to sit down and talk about ERGs as well as corporate culture. She's a trainer. She works with a lot of folks on improving how they look at company policies, how they look at corporate changes. She has grown ERGs herself. For selfish reasons, I've been wanting to speak to ERGs. There were a couple at the last place that I worked. I understand that there are a lot of parent ERGs, and I've been asked to speak at parent ERGs before. And it was really fun. And I wanted to pick her brain about how ERGs think, how they work. And for if you are somebody that is interested in creating an ERG, and by the way, ERG is short for Employee Resource Group. It's almost, I would say it's similar to in high school when there were different clubs for people with different interests. But typically these are less around interests and much more around life situations and other types of challenges that people have. I know there was a woman's ERG, there was a LGBTQIA, there was a veterans one, there was a Pacific Islanders. Trying to remember what the other one was at the place that I used to work. So they're typically people that might be dealing with some more specific challenges that are looking for resources and help. And this is what Christy is really great at talking about. Hope you get some takeaways. This is a very niche kind of thing. If you are interested in corporate culture, improving that, and or making a difference in your workplace, this is probably a good episode for you. Hi, my name's Zach. I'm your favorite mental load coach. I teach men, sometimes women, to better understand invisible labor. When it comes to domestic labor, mental load, emotional labor, I got you covered. I teach men emotional literacy and fluency. I bring guests on that for us to have conversations to improve our understanding of these concepts and these topics. Sometimes we're going to agree, sometimes we're going to disagree, but the main goal is for us to improve those conversations. Welcome to the Zach Thinks Your podcast. And hey, if this is not your first time on here, I kindly invite you to leave a review or hit the follow button if you haven't already. Look forward to sharing this with you today. Hello and welcome to the Zach Thinks Your podcast. My name and your host is Zach. I am a mental load coach. I teach men to better understand the mental load and improve the way that they go about talking about their emotions. Today on the podcast, I wanted to bring in Christy Lowry. She is the founder of the Parents Table, and a huge reason that I wanted to have her in. So I've been chatting with Christy for a couple months now, as you know, she's working with me on improving how she does short form content. But Christy, I think your expertise has come out a bit in talking about ERGs. And I have a lot of interest learning about ERGs because they seemed like a really important piece of corporate culture that is like an evolution of where I tried accomplishing things as a teacher. So quick backstory is in 2016 when I was the first time classroom teacher, I was the only class in my school that had a pride flag in the classroom. And then I went to the next school and the next school, and I was still the only person to have a pride flag. And that was one of the things they taught us in the master's program is like that small. It wasn't so small. It was like a giant, like 5 by 7 foot flag. But that makes a huge difference for a lot of people. And when I got to, you know, after being a teacher and then being in sales for 2 years in a corporate setting, I didn't know what ERGs were. It was a new thing that had kind of come to exist in the 10 years I had been outside of corporate culture. And I could see and appreciate the value, but I think there's a lot of invisible labor going on behind the scenes that I don't understand their value. So I wanted to bring you into here today to talk to people a little bit about ERGs, your experience with them. I know you've it was a parent ERG that you've started before, and
Mhm.
some of the work that you've done growing, building, cultivating, empowering people that do these things. So, Christy, maybe start with a little bit of an introduction of yourself and what you do.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you first and foremost for having me on here. I'm so excited to talk about ERGs. I feel like this is a topic that I could talk about for days and eons. So this might be a long episode, but I am a wealth of information. uh, yeah, so I am a coach, consultant, and founder of the Parents Table. And the Parents Table really came about. Um, and the name of it came about from my husband and I, because when we transitioned into parenthood, I felt like I was the lead person in deciding all of what parenthood was going to look like for me and my motherhood and him and his fatherhood. And so I felt like I really had to invite him in to that table, right? And so when we're looking at that, we're trying to create an equal space for each of us to be part of our own parenthood journey. So that's where that comes from. I think the coaching piece comes in when we're working with moms and dads, trying to help them feel more confident, capable in their parenting, but also in themselves, whether that's in work, in their marriage, in life, with their family, whatever that looks like. So, and then on the consulting piece, I focus on going in, working with HR organizations, and even, marketing orgs or and I don't know, internal organizations, talking about leave, talking about ERG strategy, really bringing systems of care to those not so like very systemized processes. So if you're talking about leave, it's, we have a policy, you take a leave, you come back from leave, return to work. We're missing the human element and care of that process. And so I come in, help them build more human centered and care forward programs around those things. But for an ERG, looking at how the ERG can really be a resource internally to those companies and not just a place where we have some feel good hours of events. So really tying the ERG value, goals, objectives, pillars into the business values, mission, and goals. So,
And
yeah,
real quick, for people that don't know what ERG stands for, it's Employee Resource Group, and I think you had
yeah.
referenced BRG, Business Resource Group. So
Mhm.
almost, it occurs to me almost like, and I don't have enough experience with this to actually know if I'm talking out of my butt, but almost like when the classroom, they're asking for parents to come volunteer for things and help out with the classroom. I'm trying to think of like what that title is, or like maybe part of the PTO. It's almost a little bit like PTO for within a corporate setting, to like do some of the invisible labor of supporting people in their experience in that culture, especially where they're not either well represented or they have no one necessarily that has their back. So like when I was in my 2 years of sales, I'm going to reference a lot, of all of the sales development reps, all of us smashing the phones and making 100 cold calls a day. I think there were 30 or 40 of us. It was probably 60%, maybe 70% guys, 30% girls. Two of us were parents,
Mm,
and it was me and a bunch of 22 to 26 year olds, me being like
mhm.
a 31-year old. So I definitely, I didn't feel like, I know my manager was definitely, well, I'm going to ask you a question in this context. So
Yeah.
I think my manager was pretty helpful in like, I was really proud of a moment when one of the 22-year-olds was watching me. We had our morning meeting every morning, and we had we still had a child in diapers. And whenever, I remember one morning, I went off camera and it was like, oh, Zach's changing a diaper. And I was like, that's so cool that this 20-something-year-old is going to get to when he's, maybe he has kids in a couple years, and know that there's some level of expectation that he knows that he's going to have some space to be a parent too. And
Mm,
I think I appreciated my manager in that pretty much any time I said, oh, my kid is sick, I really tried to not overuse that and BS it, because I think I probably
yeah.
could have milked it a little bit more. But I thought he was pretty understanding and like, hey man, take care of your family. And I think, I was a very good performer. So I think knowing that I was going to keep showing up and hitting my number also made a huge difference. Where do you think ERG plays a role in maybe I'm not having that experience as a parent? Like, man, like my manager just like, they just don't believe me when my kid is sick, or like they're giving me a bunch of crap for it. Like, where does ERG play a part in having that employee have a better experience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the ERGs are really, I think, a position within the company, if they're doing it right, to be an extension of that support. So if HR, in your specific instance, if um, you're looking at leadership and development, or you're looking at, hey, we need some manager training here, or we need some empathy training here, we need some stress and burnout and bias, unconscious bias training. Let's talk about that as part of the ERG program, because our leadership and development budget is already stacked. So the ERG can really help bring those different kinds of leadership trainings, different kinds of resources into the company that might not otherwise be seen or valued or budgeted for. I think we especially looked at how we could not just, trying to think of how to say this, um, just be I don't know, just an extension of that initiative. Like, benefits has benefits, but they don't have people communicating those benefits. So we were the arm to help communicate those benefits and have another newsletter, have more emails, have events that then we were talking about the different benefits that the company was providing, and being that just extra voice within the employee community,
Yeah,
right?
it almost reminds me like, I think I took on sort of a natural leadership position in my sales role because I was doing well. When someone new came into our team of about 8 people, I personally took it upon myself to, maybe not take them out to lunch, but like go out to lunch with them, have a chat, like hear about their experience. And it seems
Mm-hmm.
like that was a part of at least the culture that I wanted to be a part of, where someone would go out to, hey, new guy, come with us. And similarly, I'm imagining if, there's a mom or an expecting dad that paternity or maternity leave's coming down the line, they get word of it or they start seeing the baby bump. Um, is they're saying, hey, being almost an extension of like, I'm anticipating you're going to have this need, similar to I was anticipating that those new team members were going to want to have an emotional resource to come to for when they're having a bad month, when they're having a bad day. And similarly, I'm imagining parents, if they aren't feeling like all the resources are at their tips. It's almost like a built-in networking system. It's
Yeah,
almost
it's
reminds me
part
a
of the
little bit of
community.
like when you're in middle school and no one will let you come sit in their cliques down at the table,
I
but it's
see.
like
Yeah, no,
it's the
that's
parents'
super,
table.
super real. Yeah, yeah, as a parent, yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, no, I mean, the thing that comes to mind that you're talking about is the community. I think we spend so much time at the office or with our employees, right? It's 10 hours a day that we are, especially before 2020, but more so now again because we're going back to the office. We're spending that time in the office, but we're not making those friendships. Like, there needs to be a space where we have that community, where we have those friendships. We know there's research out there that says friendships is a really important piece in terms of retention and engagement in companies. And so if you're not finding and building that community within your own employee base, and you're not providing that psychological safety, maybe there's no psychological safety, or there's limited psychological safety between managers.
Mm.
ERGs can create that community and that sense of safety, and just that village. I think a lot of my experience, and why the community piece was so important when we were creating our parents and caregivers ERG, and we called them care pods. And we separated them in terms of like new mom, new dad, early years, elementary, empty nesters, those kinds of things. But it was the relocated families, right? So the people who are relocated from a different country, they don't have family, they don't have friends, they don't have neighbors yet. And so the company is really their network, like you were saying, and it can make or break their experience. It can make or break their just their longevity in the company if they don't feel like they're getting support and help, because parenthood is so challenging and it is hard to know what's good, what's not good, what works for you, what's not working for you. And so hearing from other people is really important. We all know that there's a village that we need to now create because it doesn't exist. It hasn't existed for like 50 to 100 years, but like we definitely know we need to create it now. Work should be part of that. And I think it has been part of that, but it needs to look a little different now. And those ERGs, to me, are that community.
If
Was
you
way
were
more.
to look at an organization, you were to talk to, let's say, a parent, expecting mom or a mom, and you were to hear her share a couple of challenges that exist in the culture of her workplace, what are maybe those top few issues that you're hearing in that conversation that say it would probably be really valuable for your company to have an ERG,
I mean,
specific for
loneliness.
parents?
Yeah, loneliness, not knowing. I think one of the biggest things that I experienced at my previous company was just not knowing where the resources lived, what resources there were, um, because the company and HR and benefits is doing the best that they can. The total rewards package, a lot of times it's there, we just don't know about it. And so the things that I would hear are like, do you know about this? Do you know about this? Like I almost, not almost, I definitely, and our ERG committee became the guide of where to find those resources. And so it was really this like, okay, picture this hand being HR and benefits, this hand being the rest of employees. Like really, this is where we sat in between them. There were a lot of amazing initiatives that were going on in HR that the employees up here would hear about, but it wouldn't trickle down. And so that's the other piece. So if they are having that manager trouble, that's where we could come in and be a safe place. We could bring in different resources and experts specifically to have those conversations with who we were already connected with in HR or employee experience. Doing those, employee engagement surveys were big at the company that I was at doing this. So yeah, questions about resources, where to find stuff. Do we have this? Resentment, like I can't believe we don't have this. And you're like, oh, we do. We do have backup care. Cool.
Mm.
Wait, what? Well, how am I didn't know oh, there's a childcare reimbursement. Oh my gosh. I've been spending so much and we're trying to figure out like how to get promotions. We're working our butts off. No, we have a childcare reimbursement. Oh my God, like the relief, right? So,
Mm.
listening to those things, looking for those things, I think is a big thing, and access to those benefits and awareness. But loneliness, like that community aspect, I'm not a 4 out of 5. If you're thinking about stats, and obviously I consult on leave guidance as well, but 4 out of 5 employees say they're not getting enough direct support from their managers
Mm.
during leave in
What
any case.
It was a couple weeks ago, I think you had said you were giving a talk to a
Disrupt
group,
HR. Yeah.
and you were, it was, I think it was about bereavement. What was the thing you had said? It was like someone had said like, but I'm afraid that they're gonna abuse bereavement leave.
Oh, yeah. I was on a webinar. Gosh. The question that came up 3 times around a bereavement leave, this webinar was about bereavement leave, was how do I get proof and how do I make sure that that employees don't abuse the policy? And I'm like, the policy is like 3 days, friends. So I don't think we're abusing it. We're just not understanding the impacts of grief and loss.
Mm.
So ERGs, right? There's mental health and wellness, neurodivergent, like new types of ERGs popping up where we're looking at these more care systems and this compassionate approach, empathetic approach to culture. Um, and it can have that ripple effect across not just employees and giving them the resources they need, but managers too, and leadership. So, yeah, I was stunned by that one. I don't like that question. I have a lot of thoughts about that question.
Well, same. So I'm sure there's some overlap of maybe parental leave with bereavement leave. Where, what do you think a good parent ERG is doing to like? What's the correlative? What's the question that's similar to that that business leaders or managers or C-suite executives are asking, um, similar to like what parents are advocating and asking for?
Hmm. Um, okay, can you say that? I'm not
Sure.
sure I fully understand that question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a half-baked question. I was figuring out as I was asking
No,
it.
you're good. You're good. Yeah.
So if there are leaders out there, I'm just going to say managers because it occurs to me that, oh, is it, do you think it's more C-level executives or like managers that have that kind of concern?
Which concern? That
That it's going to
what
be overused and like abused,
I think
like
it's
bereavement leave.
mm, I
Mix of
think it
both.
is the leadership. Yeah, I think it's it's a good question. Let's
Probably the
just say
people that
managers.
are that are
Yeah.
further removed from the people actually asking for the
Yeah.
leave because they're just
Because they're
seeing
looking at the
numbers, they're not
numbers.
seeing
Yeah.
names. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so let's take C-level executive, right? What is the question that they're asking that you're shaking your head and you're like, WTF? That they're asking around what parents are needing or asking for, similar to bereavement leave. What are the parents asking for that they're like pushing back on that people that the
Childcare.
employees childcare?
Childcare.
Say more about that.
Childcare. On and on. On and on and on and on. Childcare, elder care, those types of things. How am I at flex time? Um, because they're afraid they're they're honestly afraid of work not being done. They're afraid of, absences and, they hear the costs of absence, right? But they maybe should also compare that to the cost of turnover. And so looking at both of those things, looking at leaves on the same team, looking at uh, growth in your career trajectories on the same team and how these are being impacted. I mean, a lot of parents especially have that flight pattern and that ramp up. They don't have it off. The number one thing that people are looking for, especially when they come back from leave, is career progression. And so, like, they're not saying, okay, yeah, let me waste some time, let me sit on my laurels, like, no, the parents in the workplace a lot of times are the most ambitious people. No, they don't have a lot of time, but man, do they make use of their time. They're more efficient, they're more effective. The skill set that they have, bringing in compassion and empathy and understanding, vulnerability, because they have a newborn that cries all the time, because they are completely changed, because they have a toddler who they just went through three absolute meltdown and explosions before they even got into the working world, right? Like they're emotionally spent. They just want to get their stuff done. They want to do a good job because they have responsibilities at home, but they want to have their time valued at work a lot. And so going back to ERGs and like tying it into ERGs, like this is where the ERG can help the voice of the parent of the caregiver also come to life, right? So through focus groups, through surveys, through polling, any sort of polling and conversations, right? In person monthly meetings, community meetings, and really understanding like the pain points that these people are experiencing and how HR can create different policies, different procedures, different trainings, different benefits because of it. And that's really like, I think that there's a misconception that ERGs are only there to entertain, only there to have a few events during the year.
Mm,
And I disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree. Like the work that the ERGs are doing and the committees that they're doing are benefiting companies so much. Um, I wish I had a stat like off the top of my head. I know there are stats out there. I love my stats. But you see it, we know that DEI has a positive impact on business revenue and growth, right?
mm,
Same with ERGs. It's because it's a safe, it's creating a safe place and a culture
mm.
at work and community.
Yeah, and
So,
I remember, you know, I used to work at a trauma-informed school where it was an all-girls school. Like 80% of the girls had gone through some sort of SA, and
mm,
it was a hard place to work. It was a mixture of you were helping these teenagers regulate things that they had no words for, and had to manage your own affect and had to do a lot of emotional labor to do your job right. Um, and I remember them talking about they had this might feel like a hard left turn, but I'll come bring it back. They had like an employee of the month and an employee of the week. And I got my sweatpants over here that I earned back in 2021 from employee of the week. Um, they would use it for specifically when they could tell someone was getting burned out and they needed like a little pick me up to be
mm,
like, hey, we need you to stay for a couple more months at least.
mm. Yeah.
Especially like if one of the teachers got assaulted. I almost got tackled by a kid at one point. I remember one woman got like a desk thrown at her,
Oh
and had
my
a
goodness.
concussion. Um, it was a challenging place to work, but I think it wasn't until a while in, I think the principal said, yeah, we lost another person. And I realized it's embarrassing how long into my like career this took me to like get the ROI of turnover. But he's like, yep, so we're gonna have to hire. I think it was just the way he put it is like, yep, we're gonna have to hire an extra person to go train the new person for like a week. And we're gonna have to pay them extra for the job that they're doing there. And I was like, oh my God, I had never necessarily considered the dollar ROI of turnover because you have to train new people. Even thinking about like when I was a pretty good sales rep and they had to replace me, like it took three newbies to make up the number that I was hitting for 3 quarters straight almost. Um, so realizing putting more money into your ERG that helps people feel belonging, feel valued, feel like they're showing up, feeling seen and heard, and not looking for employment elsewhere. Like you
Yeah.
could probably spend a quarter of the ROI on turnover on having them feel valued on a consistent basis rather than once a year pizza party where
Yeah.
they pull out some of the stops for you. Um,
Yeah. No, exactly. Exactly.
I feel like there's
Yeah, I
got
mean, belonging.
we're gonna dig
Yeah,
up
go
some
ahead.
good stats after this probably that maybe I could put in the email when I send it out.
Yeah,
But
for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, just going off of the belonging, I think that is a huge aspect of it that we're feeling not just outside of work, but also inside of work. I think there's a lot of uncertainty just in the world at large, definitely in the US, but having a safe place where you feel like, okay, I can have these kinds of conversations and not get judged, or I can show up as who I am, and it's accepted, right? And so the sense of belonging, it's it's a human need. I mean, for me, personally, it is, I think, a big reason why I do the things that I do. I didn't feel like I belonged in a lot of spaces and places as I was growing up due to my certain circumstances and life circumstances. But um, that sits deep. That's a deep core thing in me. And so as I'm trying to find my place and find belonging, I'm also really passionate about creating spaces of belonging for people elsewhere, where belonging isn't
Mm.
um, given and seen.
I want to come back for a second. I think I got us off track here, talking about childcare. And tell
Hmm.
me a little bit, again, this is me being removed from uh, the corporate workplace and not understanding it nearly as well as you do. What do those requests look like from parents around childcare? Are you saying like, hey, I got to pick up my kid at 2 because they're homesick? Like, can I use some flex time on that? Or is it more like them advocating for, um, when you're talking about childcare, is it like them needing time away from work to care for their child, or is it more about like helping getting easier, better access to childcare via the actual company? Did that make
Yeah,
sense?
all of it, honestly. It's understanding like even the child care tax credit. That could be not as simple, but like knowing what the process is, what that looks like, could be, hey, is the company partnered with any childcare centers nearby? Do we get a
Mm-hmm.
discount because we are going to go use this facility versus another? It is how can we make a space and a place at the company office for a child care center? What does that look like? And there's specific companies that go in and take half of a company's floor and create a child care center. It's beautiful. Uh, and bring in all the teachers and do all of that. And that's a benefit that the company provides. Like if you want, as a company, you want people to come to the office, put a child care center in your office.
Mm-hmm.
Because we know the majority of people working there, your employee base are parents, right? So um, it's all of those things. It's how do I find a nanny? What are the questions I need to ask a nanny or a au pair or a child care center? Like there's so many resources around childcare. Summer camps for the older parents. What do I do for summer camps? Is there anything that the company provides? How do I find out about summer camps near me? Like, I was just on a call this morning with a friend of mine who was like, yeah, I typically put my kids, and they're preteen now. I typically put my kids in a full summer daycare, and then it's consistent with my working hours, and I can manage that a lot better. But this year, she's doing this aftercare center or this summer camp or this summer camp, and she's like, but the rest of the time we're just gonna be feral and outside and bored and try and keep you guys off of tech. But this is the struggle that takes away time and focus and mental energy. You talk about invisible labor a lot. It's a ton of invisible labor, mental load, emotional load, right? For me and my story, like my mom died 2.5 years ago, right? She was part of my child care network. I
Mm-hmm.
I this is a sensitive topic for me talking about summer camp.
Yeah.
Because I know that she would watch my kids and she would have activities and she would come over if she was still alive. And so trying to bring some uh sense of compassion around it. It's not just a budget item check mark. Like these are people's lives. And if we're not, as companies, trying to help take care of them, they are going to leave. Uh, like just flat out, like that's what the numbers say. It's not from my perspective. That's
Mm-hmm.
literally what the numbers say. People are looking for better care and money, but also better care.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like there's so much that I don't know that I don't know about these things that I almost don't
Yeah,
even know where to ask next. If
yeah.
if you were talking with an parent ERG leader, they just started. They're like, okay, we got the okay, we got a little bit of a budget, maybe $1,000 for the next month. I have no idea what a budget would be, but like, what might be some of the first questions or um, directions that you would encourage that person that's
Mhm.
like getting started to do?
Yeah, I would when we created or when I created the one at my previous company, um I did it a lot different than the other ERGs because the other ERGs were already established. They had been there for, I don't know, at least 5 years, 2 to 5 years each. And it was kind of never like none of the ERGs had to be pitched. I had to pitch
Mm,
this one. And
mm,
so I would I would suggest the first thing is making sure that your ERG connects with the business values and the vision and that you have specific goals and that those goals relate to the gaps. So, like a first step would be to consult if you have an employee engagement survey and a team or a person that runs that, I'd consult with that person to understand what are the gaps that we could fill. What are you hearing on the employee engagement surveys? Where are we missing the mark? And put that as part of your goals. Childcare for our ERG was a goal, which is why I said like childcare day in and day out. Uh, the other thing is to relate it to business goals and like the thing that the best some of the best advice I got from a what was going to be our executive sponsor and then he actually ended up leaving um, the company, but was to make sure that the ERG strategy aligned with the business strategy and you were actually benefiting the company in a way where revenue could be impacted and maybe you could even tie it to that. So
mm.
we looked at doing more focus groups. We looked at discuss it like again, we were only 5 people. We could only accomplish so much. We accomplished so much.
Yeah.
Um, but looking at those things and how really truly the ERG could be strategic, not just another like again, like event arm and um employee engagement arm, right? Like there's typically a whole team with that. I think the third thing would be internal communications and partnering with that team and understanding like what's just the logistics of internal communications, what their plan is, what their roadmap is. And then, like I've said before, I think the fourth one might be benefits. So it's really a lot of networking, understanding and evaluating what the gaps are, and then how to communicate, but tying it to goals, vision, and values as well.
So I'm embarrassed that normally I feel like this would be easy for me, but I'm struggling right now. So one thing that I think I'm pretty darn good at is talking about goals, setting goals, and like coming up with appropriate metrics that are both good for my habits around them and or good for like me to track that's gonna benefit me psychologically. I know a lot of mine are very like I don't typically set goals like a follower count. I just set goals for what I can do, which is how many posts that I put up on a consistent
Mhm.
basis. As you're talking about setting goals and or setting business, looking at like the business values, business goals, and how you can tie that with like a parent ERG, my mind is absolutely blank right now and like
Oh,
what
okay.
a good goal looks like. Can you like paint a picture for me? Like
Mm,
what
gosh.
is a what's a good goal that you've seen before? Might not fit every company, but like I can't even I'm struggling to
I'm trying to
fathom
think
that.
of what our goals were. Obviously, I wasn't able to take anything from the company.
Yeah.
So mad about that. Um, but let's see. I think, hmm, That's a really good question and a hard question. I mean, a goal,
Well, or
this
maybe
is where
like
they,
if
yeah.
you were encouraging someone to set goals, like what would be some of the questions that you might ask to help them come to a goal that it's in the right direction?
I think it goes back to just evaluating um, the gaps, right? Like, isn't that how we set goals on a personal level? Like, what are the, what's working and what's not working? Um, and okay, what's not working is this. And so,
Well, all right.
you know,
Let me pivot my
yeah,
question a little bit more. Is when you went to pitch your parent ERG,
yeah,
you already had a gap in mind. What was the gap that you were illustrating for them that you're like, we need a
yeah,
parent ERG?
yeah. No, it was that I was literally hearing, like, I don't know what to do, uh, with preparing for leave. I don't know where resources are. Okay, so yeah, thank you. Like, I'm like, what were my goals? What were those specific things? Like, I get so like black and white sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, but it was one of our goals was to make the resources more accessible. And so one of the people, and the way we did that, right, like, was to identify who the key stakeholders were on making those resources more accessible. So on the committee, we got someone who was in charge of the internal site, the internal, like, what is it called? Some whatever self-service platform that you have, the company intranet, right?
Yep.
Um, and so the person who's in charge of that has to do a lot of, honestly, SEO work. And I don't think people understand that.
Hmm.
They just get annoyed that they can't find it. But this person is working through keywords constantly, creating new keywords, doing
Hmm.
tagging, doing a lot of things on that self-service platform. Anyway, so we also created a lot of new documents, um, and the employee engagement team because they were hearing a lot of the same things. So that's what I mean when I would say it comes down to really evaluating what those gaps are and what you're hearing, and then evaluating like, okay, here's a specific goal or focus, at least a focus area, and make your goals very, reasonable and small, knowing that this is a lot of volunteer work, unpaid labor. Um, you get maybe lucky to have someone in a certain team pulled in, and that can be part of their day job, and they can put that on their quarterly reviews that they did that. But yeah, does that help? I know you don't. I know you're saying you don't know what you don't know. Um, I think one of the other questions you had mentioned was like, what does a good ERG look like?
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know if you want to go through that or anything.
Yeah. Well, if you were to look at two companies where you're kind of maybe a colleague said to you like, "Hey, Christy, we've worked on a bunch of these things together. One of these suck. One of these is really good." How would you figure it out the quickest? Like if you were told there's a correct answer to one of these is not accomplishing much, one is, what is the quickest way that you would like if you had access to Slack, you could message anyone you want in the company. Like what's the quickest way you find that out?
Hmm. I want to say if they're only doing events, like I'm not opposed to doing events,
Yeah.
but in my
Is like
mind,
someone coming in for a guest speaker, like is that an event that you're referring to?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it's like, um, and guest speakers are great, and and they're like we're very needed in that space. Um, I feel like I want to change my answer. Can you cut this?
I'm not gonna cut it. That you know me and my no friction policy, but
Oh my
um,
gosh,
yeah,
Zach.
I'll let you have a redo. What's the quickest way? So you get 24 hours each at the company on their Slack channels. Uh, do you think you have? Do you think you could pull together enough data to figure out which one is the ERG that's accomplishing a bunch versus the one that's not? Let's assume everyone is in work that day. you have access to, let's say everyone's physically in work and you can talk to anyone and you just show up at their desk.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on how the company wants to utilize the ERGs, right? And it depends on
So
what
it sounds like
the
first being able to find their goals quickly sounds like
yeah, yeah,
that's one
and their
place.
vision and their values, yeah. And making sure that they're aligned to those things, um, is where I would probably start. I would then look at like the level of members that they have and the engagement that they have with those members. Um, that's
So
probably
it
the
might
second
be
thing I
starting
look
with just seeing the sheer number of people in, if there's an
at.
ERG Slack channel, and it
Yep.
might be looking at like, okay, in the last, looking at the Slack channel in the last month, how many back and forth messages are there? How many resources are being shared? And probably even just see, we'll assume that they're using Slack for this example is um, even just being able to look at the number of messages, communications,
Hmm.
that might be a pretty easy dipstick to like figure out which one
Hmm.
is the one that's accomplishing more.
Yeah, I mean, how are you measuring real change from the ERG is, I think, the biggest question on my mind. Like, is it through events? And maybe those events and those workshops are incredible and you're finding your employees are finding so much value. And maybe
Mm.
that's all you have time and budget to do, even though events and coordinating that is an insane amount of time sometimes.
Mm.
Um, and that's why I'm saying, like, it, to your point, yes. What are their goals? What's their mission? What's their vision? And are they executing on it? And then looking at those other metrics of engagement and members.
Yeah, I'm thinking about I'm having this moment of I remember when I don't know if they announced it was a new ERG, but it was when they announced when I did stickers at our company of like the different it was pretty much our company logo with some other interesting colors in the background. So one was a bunch of women, one was the progress flag, one was
Mm.
I forget what it was somewhat representative. It was like the Juneteenth colors, like red, green, black, I think. And then
Okay.
the other one was like the Pacific Islanders. And I remember someone approached one of my colleagues of Asian descent and asked him to was it be part of it or do something involved. And he was just like kind of venting to me, saying like, "Yeah, I'm just like the token Asian for this group or something."
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and that occurs to me like a moment where like, all right, that ERG leader is probably doing something wrong where they weren't a safe enough space for him to feel like he had to vent to me, random white dude that was on his team. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm even I think even what I'm one of my other side questions I'm trying to answer for myself is I have no idea how effective the ERGs were at my previous work. I remember the events. I am I am the of all the I think parenthood is probably the only place I don't rank on like the feel weird saying this, but like the power scale of like oppression, like tall, white,
Mm.
middle class, like being a
Sure.
parent is the only like not simplicity of my life around like my privilege.
Yeah.
So I didn't fit into any of those communities as like being a person that was representative. I could only be an ally to all of them.
Right.
Um,
I think that's
so I've
really, but that's really important, right? And you don't necessarily like, that's why there is allyship in the company. That is why there is an open invite, not just for women in the company, but everyone. Like, that's why those things get sent out to the company because we do want allies across the board. And I think that was one thing that I wish I heard more of and saw more of is the collaboration between ERGs and having global ERG events and cross ERG events because the BIPOC and the parents and caregivers and the women and the LGBTQ, like we did a wonderful Mother's Day, or I think it was more like, yeah, I think it was parents between May and June. And so we had fireside chats, we had different resources from different ERGs highlighted between these 2 months to focus on parents because we knew that just because we had a parents and caregivers ERG didn't mean that there weren't parents and caregivers in the other ERGs, right? So it's really working across and collaborating too, which is so important. But I think one of the things that you mentioned um, that is also important, like not knowing what the ERGs are doing and the impact that they're having. That is one thing that I learned how to show my work, right? Because
Mm.
it was so important. And a lot of times I don't know, I feel like in my entire career, I was never the person to show my work. I was always the person behind the scenes. I was always like, "Oh yeah, no, I'll do this. I have good ideas and I'll go execute." And like, but to get a promotion and to get seen and to get appreciated and all of it, like your work has to be seen. And so that is one thing that the ERG definitely helped me personally with my career is like showing my work and showing the benefit that we were actually having to those employees, but also making sure you're listening for those things. Um, and that's a big
Well,
component too.
let me ask you this around showing your work. So let's say, you're one of your C-suite executives saying, "Hey, they were talking in this meeting earlier today about cutting your budget into thirds, and you're going to get a third of the money next year, unless they have some good proof of like what you've been accomplishing. They're going to invite you and the other ERG leaders to come speak in a couple days, like in front of the group. Like, can you have something ready? What do you show up with?"
I mean, I show up with data and analytic. Like I show up with these are quotes from your actual employees around the benefit. This is the number.
You
Like
got to
I
spell
show
it
the
out for me.
data.
Like, remember, this is I don't know that I don't know. So quotes.
Yeah.
So like what kind of data?
Um, so how many? So that's where I'm looking at the number of members we have in each, the impact, and then looking at the percentage across the board, right? Like you have 1,000 employees, 700 of them are members within these different ERGs. Like 70% of your employee base clearly have some level of interest and participation. Um, and then I'm looking at people joining events, like that kind of data, webinars, workshops. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the pre and post surveys, right?
Mhm.
So as you and I go in and do workshops, we do speaking events, we do collaborations with other people in the company, fireside chat, whatever it looks like. Um, you and I are doing pre and post surveys, like or pre focus groups, interviews, pre interviews, so we can customize our workshop and then post um, workshop surveys. But in those post workshop surveys, I don't think a lot of people are considering what does the ERG need to prove and how can I leverage these specific workshops surveys to start pulling that out. So like
Mhm.
it's not just, hey, how was the workshop? It's, hey, how was the workshop? And one or two
Yeah.
questions. What are you missing? What do you wish we would have talked about? How are we doing in this area? Or are you craving more? Are you wanting more XYZ ABC? Um, Using those moments of interaction to really emphasize like what's our value, like are we doing it, are we getting it right, like are we doing the
Mhm.
thing that we set out to do, which was being advocates for these people. um so looking at those opportunities too, but I think going back to your question too, it's customer quotes, employee quotes,
Mhm.
the value of the different types of things that we've done, and then also the committee. I I created with these ERGs, these committees are such passionate, wonderful people that want to create change. They want to advocate. They have had their own personal hardship and they want to make change. these are leaders in the company that you should not ignore. You should pay attention to and give them a
Yeah.
white glove service um, in your company. Like pay attention to these people. These people are the sunshine, the light in your companies that's just going to ripple affect everything. They're doing the volunteer work, and this isn't like an hour or two a week. This is I spent a ton of time, and my committee members did too. And so I want to bring what they're doing and what they're saying into those conversations. Like you're not just it's not just how big our numbers are, it's the level of impact. Look, I got a promotion because I did this work. I'm now a more longer term employee. I'm more valuable to your company. um,
Mm.
I like we talk about word of mouth and marketing, and that it's the best form of advertising, or it could be your worst enemy. If you, that has a ripple effect, a significant ripple effect when you're talking about committee members and they're getting recognized and they're doing meaningful work. Um, from several of my committee members, I heard so often, like, thank you so much for creating this. It's given me more meaning in my work and a
Mm.
heartbeat in the company for me. Like, what else? What else? What else do you
Yeah.
want? You
Yeah. What
know?
else can you ask for from there? That's a huge.
Yeah.
So I think I
What do
came
you,
in here with the questions of like what is the goal of an ERG? And I think the answer that you gave to that was like it kind of depends. For a lot of people, it's advocating for, especially for parent ERGs, childcare and like creating information availability and or acceptance around flexibility for parents. Um, I think I came in wanting to understand what does it look like when that's being accomplished, or what does a good goal look like. And I think you've answered that it's being able to identify gaps from word of mouth, from maybe it's like more empirical data like surveys, and like finding ways to close that gap, and or again having data to show that those gaps are being filled. um, and it sounds like if you were to have some basic measurements, like a dipstick on whether your oil's doing well and if your ERG is doing well, it's like conversational engagement and the amount of messages going back and forth in possibly a group. But also, like if you were to look at it qualitatively, it's how much more people feel engaged, welcomed, represented, and supported in, there's probably no white male ERG out there, because we all feel very supported in our privilege. So I think it's for people that are not having that same level of privilege, that are not feeling supported. It's ERGs are successful if they're feeling a different level of support than they did beforehand.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I hear you saying, the white male privilege, and there are ERGs and BRGs out there starting to um cross those things in terms of,
Hmm.
hey, if you want to be in leadership, doesn't matter what your gender, your sex, your race, your ethnicity, doesn't matter. If you want to be a leader, we have an ERG specific to come support
Mentorship
those
and
up and coming.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and mentorship. And so there's different programs that you could do there, right?
Hmm.
Where you have mentors with C-levels. You have, specific workshops that are coming and talking about leadership. You have negotiation, like get some training on negotiation, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
How do I show my work? I would love for someone to come in and tell me earlier in my career, like, here's how someone like you, who might be more introverted, and needs a bit more confidence coaching to show your work. Here's what it means to show your work, and like talk about yourself in a what doesn't feel like so much arrogance, but in confidence.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, they're changing and they're shifting, and they should, and it's like again, it's the listening arm, the advocacy arm within the company.
Yeah. Well,
So did we,
Christy,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
uh, yeah, go ahead, ask your question.
Oh, I was gonna say, what was like your biggest aha moment or takeaway? And did I shift any misconceptions that you might have had?
Yeah, I think I came in thinking that parent ERGs had a very specific goal in total. And what I think I gathered from it was like, yes, there's a couple common ones, but at the same time, it's like DIY. It's like you can kind of choose your own goal. So I think, another perspective of this is, I got to, it wasn't an ERG, but I did get to speak to a team last year about invisible labor. We just went through a lot of vocabulary. We created sort of, a fair play minimum standard of care with something that had a bunch of invisible labor to it. Um, Looking back, I did a bad job like delivering on the survey, in that like I don't have
Oh,
good empirical evidence of like the impact that it had. Um, but thinking about, I've talked with people about potentially coming to speak to their parent ERGs, and I have these moments of like, I don't know what the heck I don't really know what their goals are, and I don't know what to teach them. So I think a huge takeaway for me as someone that could see myself speaking to parent ERGs is I can start with, what are your ERG's goals? And I had not necessarily considered, I just kind of figured there was like an implicit goal, but not an explicit goal. And it sounds like that's a huge part of like an ERG that's probably well funded, probably has some explicit goals. And being able to align with those is like a really clear way to go about seeing whether it's worth working with one or not. And I think that was something I had not fully considered or understood about ERGs, is that a good one probably has some explicit goals that are aligned with their company. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's probably my big takeaway right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I'm also left
Yeah.
with, I think, more questions than I started with as well, because now there's things that I know that I don't know, and then there's probably still more, that just as much that I don't know. But
Yeah. I mean, I'm still learning.
yeah.
And this is a changing landscape too. Like the work I was doing in the ERG was 2, 3 years ago at this point. So like the landscape after this year is much different. But I think the
Mm,
philosophy behind it and having it as a guide for the employees and a connection point between HR and an advocacy organization for silenced or unheard or underutilized voices is really important too. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I think, and maybe we have a part two of something, but like you mentioned the finances of it. Finances for ERGs are complicated too.
Mm.
Um, and like I never had a budget. I love that. So that's a misconception that ERGs do
Oh,
have budgets. Uh, they they uh they don't always have budgets. They have to prove that they have budgets. And so when you can go in to a company and prove that you can align with their goals, that you can meet the majority of their members and provide a certain level of value, you're building a business case for them, right?
mm,
So how can you build a business case for them so you can get the budget?
gotcha. Yeah, that's all right. That was something I didn't know, that I didn't know, that you just both. Now I knew that I didn't know, and now it's myth busted for me. Um,
Great. Great.
yeah, those will put. Well,
Yeah.
Christy, I could probably talk to you for a really long time about ERGs, but I feel like this was a good first large bite into thinking about that, considering what people could be looking for. Where would you like people to find you, if they want to chat more about this, or more of what you do at Parents Table?
Yeah, you can find me at my Instagram handle at the parents table, or just search me on LinkedIn at Christy Lowry. Like that's my name.
We'll plop
Uh,
that in the chat. We'll put that in
yeah,
the notes.
that sounds good.
Um, well, Christy, thank you for coming today and chatting with me. I feel like
Thank
I'm
you.
at least more well equipped. I don't know if I'm smarter, but definitely more well resourced, um,
Yeah, yeah,
better understanding what ERGs stand for, what their goals are, and how to support them.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Zach. Appreciate the
Welcome.
conversation.
Yeah.